Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. The nation celebrating Veterans Day from coast to coast. President Biden commemorates the holiday by paying a visit to Arlington National Cemetery. And the Big Apple hosts the country's largest event honoring the brave men and women who've served. A Veterans Day event in Virginia, planned and organized by an 8-year-old. The fourth grader was supposed to be in school today, but he took the day off to show his respect for America's servicemen and women. New testimony in the Rittenhouse trial. A journalist lends support to the defendant's self-defense position. The Biden administration is resettling underage illegal immigrants in Florida and New York State. Florida's governor proposes to counter this by sending the illegal immigrants to Biden's home state of Delaware. A mixed reality tech expo resumes in the San Francisco Bay Area. Augmented and virtual reality companies and professionals gather for a chance to connect and learn from each other. President Biden honored America's veterans at the Arlington National Cemetery. Today is his first Veterans Day in office, and it's the first one in 2 decades without a war underway. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more on Biden's remarks.
Biden visited the Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia on Thursday to deliver remarks and lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. In his speech, he paid homage to the unrelenting bravery of American veterans.
Our veterans represent the best of America. You are the very spine of America, not just the backbone. You're the spine of this country. And all of us owe you.
The commemoration comes 100 years after the creation of the white marble sarcophagus. The tomb is a symbol honoring all service members who gave their lives to defend the nation, and specifically those whose remains have not been identified. The national commander of the Jewish war veterans said Americans owe veterans their thanks, respect, and their freedom. Then he quoted the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army.
George Washington spoke about the country's obligation to care for its veterans and their families. He said, "The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any way shall be directly proportional to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by their nation."
Biden also unveiled an effort to treat vets who were exposed to toxic environments. And during the ceremony, Biden called for bipartisan support to care for them.
I want you to know that our administration is going to meet the sacred obligation that we owe you. We're going to work with Congress, Republicans and Democrats together to make sure our veterans receive the world-class benefits that they've earned and meet the specific care, specific needs that they each individually need.
The new federal effort aims to help veterans make claims if they have symptoms and to collect more data from troops so vets have more time to make claims after sinus and asthma symptoms occur. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Some spent Veterans Day touring the multitude of memorials at the nation's capital. Today, our Washington, D.C. reporter Melina Weiskup takes us to the wreath-laying ceremony at the Korean War Memorial.
Here in the nation's capital, one could stop by any number of memorials to honor veterans on Veterans Day, but today we decided to stop by the Korean War Veterans Memorial to honor the tens of thousands of lives lost during the Korean War. We got a chance to speak with a couple of veterans who served during that war, an older couple, both of whom served during the Korean War.
I did what they told me to do and tried to do the best job, and then came home. I found Alice, and we've been together for some 64 years after we found each other.
I think we're all very young. Patients and personnel, we're all quite young.
When things got difficult for you, what would you tell yourself to keep putting effort and moving forward?
Tomorrow will be better. You know, it's just that. and it usually was.
And their sacrifice and dedication is most definitely met with gratitude, especially from those citizens who are now enjoying a nation of prosperity and freedom under the South Korean government. We got a chance to speak with the First Lady of Maryland, who is a Korean American herself, sharing her words of gratitude. Let's listen.
It's very important to me. If they didn't sacrifice, we are not here. I'm not here standing here today. So every time I come, thank them. Very important.
Because it represents something to them that many of us have never had to feel in America, where we were challenged of our very sovereignty and our very democracy. People come here every year. It educates them on the cost of war. There are going to be over 43,000 names in 3 years. Remember, the war went from 1950 to 1953. We lost 43,000. I think it's important that we pay homage to the fallen and to their families. Remember, this is not just a soldier, sailor, airman, marine. This is a soldier, sailor, airman, marine, their father, their son, their entire family.
And this war was essentially a war against communism to prevent the communist ideology from spreading to South Korea. During the time of the war, North Korea was backed by China and the Soviet Union, with South Korea drawing support from the United Nations and strong support from the United States. And this memorial is the only memorial with actual photographs displayed along the wall of the memorial. And all of these photographs were taken by American photographers during the time of the war. We spoke with the artist of this mural, who says it took long hours of going through photograph after photograph and deciding which ones to display here on this mural. He says he hopes when people come to observe it, they'll feel a change within.
So I think that people are going to come here, and something may happen immediately. It may happen in the next hour. It may happen in the next year or 2 years and so forth. But somehow or another, they will change.
And this site is still under construction right now while they're vetting all of the names of the fallen soldiers and getting them inscribed here on this memorial. But they say they hope the construction will be fully complete and it'll be opened back up with a whole new look by July of 2022. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And New York City is also celebrating Veterans Day. The Big Apple held the nation's largest Veterans Day parade. NTD's Arian Pazdar was at the scene.
Because if you had no veterans, you'd have no country. If you had no veterans, you have no freedoms. Thank a veteran every day.
The day started with a solemn wreath-laying ceremony. Every military branch was proudly represented. After the ceremony, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer told me the country should do more for veterans.
Make sure those who are still here get the best possible health care.
Anything else that should be done, or is it mostly the health care in your opinion?
Well, health care, but remembering, honoring, hiring.
Attorney General Letitia James also wants to include former service members in the workforce.
Hire veterans. They're disciplined, they're loyal, and they're true patriots.
Soon after the ceremony, the parade started. Veterans Day Parade has officially kicked off. There's the New York Fire Department right here, and behind them are all kinds of military branches. There's the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, you name it. We spoke to some of the veterans, and we also spoke to some of the active service members. The parade's Grand Marshal says it's an important day to inspire young Americans.
All the camaraderie and stuff that maybe it'll generate them into maybe joining the service one day.
Active service members sang march songs and drove along in their military vehicles. Colonel Wiederholt was deployed in Afghanistan with the U.S. Air Force.
Yeah, I think everyone was surprised at how fast the country collapsed, right? And so in the organization that I'm commander of, we actually had crews operating and were a part of the evacuation as well. And so pretty rewarding experience for everyone that participated in it.
He didn't comment on any decision-making regarding the withdrawal and said he's proud to serve his country by following the orders he receives. James Bishop was part of a rescue mission.
I think I'm the rock star of this parade.
When he served in Japan during World War II.
We're holding Americans prisoners on that island. I get in there and I wipe them all out and save all our Americans.
This year's Veterans Day Parade was New York's first one since the pandemic, and it included around 200 marching units. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
And more on the New York City parade today. We get an exclusive look at some of the marching bands in the parade. NTD's Chenny Wu was there.
New York City is alive with music from the many marching bands in the Veterans Day Parade. The bands are here to show their support for America's heroes.
We couldn't be more excited. This is, a really special time of the year for us, where we get to, honor the millions of veterans who have served right now.
One of the bands that stood out was the Tianguo Marching Band, whose members were dressed in the attire of ancient China.
The Tianguo Marching Band participates nearly every year in the Veterans Day Parade. Veterans Day is very important to America, and veterans make huge contributions.
Parade goers say the bands made the city very lively.
The marching bands are great. They always pump up the crowd when we need a little extra cheer.
The band played well together. We're visiting from England, and it was just nice to come and see something like this today.
It's wonderful. I love it. All these veterans here with us, America's here, we all stick together, And after all the situations that happened, like with COVID and everything, everybody's here united.
Across the country, Americans are honoring the service members who've given so much on our behalf. Chenny Wu, NTD News, New York.
And an 8-year-old in Virginia wants his school to observe Veterans Day. He didn't go to school today and instead organized his own event. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
Testing. Okay. Good morning, America!
Good morning! Austin Riddell isn't shy when it comes to public speaking or showing his respect for America's military men and women.
I'm going to make sure every student knows that their dreams can come true because of the United States military forces.
Yeah. The 8-year-old organized the event to honor America's veterans for their hard work and sacrifice.
I could never get away with an event like this in North Korea, China, and lots of other places. Only in America are we this free, and it's all because of our courageous veterans.
Yeah.
You gave me a voice to go in front of the Board of Education, to go in front of the Board of Supervisors,
Whoa.
To change the world, starting right here in Winchester.
Yep. Riddell recently gave a speech in front of his school board where he advocated for them to allow a day off for Veterans Day. He told the school board that something was not right with the school calendar.
A few months ago, I told my mom that having a day out of school for the Apple Blossom Festival was great. That meant we had a 3-day weekend. But then I started thinking. I asked my mom if we also got out of school for Veterans Day. She told me no, and I thought, how unbalanced.
He went on to tell them that he was not going to have perfect attendance because he does not go to school on Veterans Day. And for that, he got a standing ovation. And on this Veterans Day, instead of going to school, he hosted a Veterans Day event.
Each of you put your boots on, your hats on, left your families, and did whatever your country, whatever your people needed you to do.
The 4th grader wants to be a senator when he grows up. Other veterans also spoke at the event, and in attendance was Lieutenant Governor-elect Winsome Sears, a Marine veteran. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And crowds honored military veterans today at a huge parade on the West Coast. Here's NTD's David Lamb with more details.
This annual parade is organized by the United Veterans Council of Santa Clara County. Their mission is to support veterans, active duty military members, and their families.
So as you can see, we have a marching band coming up, and this parade is said to be one of the largest Veterans Day parade in the country. It's a day to say thank you to the military.
So my dad, Jose Carrasco, was in World War II. He was in the Battle of the Bulge. He did go all the way through the European campaign.
One attendee comes every year with her family to honor her father.
And he came home on the Queen Mary and then lived in San Jose and got married to my mom, Lillian Carrasco. She's 94, young. They are friends for life. Before they went to the war, they knew each other. And Tomas, my mom and my dad, and they all know each other from back in the day. So they're together once again.
A wide lineup of military and classic cars also joined the parade.
I like the cars go by.
and the people holding the guns.
He's giving me a very smooth ride. It's a delight.
Better than a new car.
To all the veterans out there.
A speaker said that the event is 100% funded by donations. Over at a nearby park, a ceremony was held with officials, veterans, and the community.
So every year the veterans march in the Rose, White, and Blue Parade, and we're grateful for them doing it and for their service. And so this is just a way for us to honor them.
I was 35 years. I started in 1966 and wrapped it up in 2001, a couple of days before 9/11.
This is a holiday for every American citizen and every person who's come to America who wants to be an American citizen.
Veterans all over the world, and we are celebrating the spirit of patriotism and the idealism that makes this country great.
Veterans Day was originally called Armistice Day, commemorating the end of World War I. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Today, an on-the-ground journalist testified in the Rittenhouse trial. In his eyewitness testimony, he described the defendant as a non-aggressor who even de-escalated a tense situation. But the prosecution suggested a possible bias in the witness. Here's the update.
The legal team defending Kyle Rittenhouse had professional commentator and journalist Frank Hernandez take the witness stand. Hernandez documented the Kenosha protests and riots on the day Rittenhouse shot 3 men, killing 2. He lent support to Rittenhouse's self-defense position, saying Joseph Rosenbaum lunged at the then 17-year-old before being shot.
Kyle is right at the corner, right there, in the car source, and turns around, and Rosenbaum is lunging towards him very clearly, and Kyle fires.
And do you see that with your eyes?
Yes.
The witness also depicted the defendant as a de-escalator.
Did you observe him acting in an aggressive manner to anyone that you observed?
In no way, shape, or form. The first time I saw Kyle, he actually de-escalated a situation.
Did you observe him at any time that evening pointing his firearm at anybody or threatening anybody with that firearm?
No.
But prosecutor Thomas Binger suggested there was a potential bias in the witness.
You had indicated that you have provided with both the defense and the state with your full footage from the night of August 25th. Is that right?
Yes.
And you did that through an attorney from a law firm from Madison, correct?
Yes.
And that's an attorney whose firm is also providing services to the defendant in this case, correct?
Today is the first time I'm hearing of this, so I don't have any bias because I just heard about this today.
Former Milwaukee County Assistant DA Daniel Adams has called Binger's case incredibly underwhelming. Rittenhouse faces multiple charges, including 2 for first-degree murder and 1 for attempted murder. But Adams says he believes Binger will 100% ask the judge to add lower charges, most likely second-degree versions of the homicide and reckless endangerment counts. If, for example, second-degree murder is added, the jurors could convict Rittenhouse of this crime if they believe he acted in self-defense but used an unreasonable amount of force. Reporting by Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Coming up, in New York City, a Black Lives Matter leader threatens rioting and bloodshed after meeting with Mayor-elect Eric Adams. And California won't be able to get $12 billion of federal public transit funding. That's because the Labor Department is having problems with California's pension system. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News. Black Lives Matter is threatening riots and bloodshed in New York if the city returns to old ways of policing. That's after leaders of the organization met with Mayor-elect Eric Adams behind closed doors. NTD's Jim Battolini has more.
Hawk Newsom, co-founder of Black Lives Matter of Greater New York, promises rioting and bloodshed if Mayor-elect Eric Adams goes back to earlier policing methods, including anti-crime units. Newsom made the threats after meeting with the mayor-elect yesterday. Here's Newsom in this video captured by Scootercaster making the threat.
If they think that they're going to go back to the old ways of policing, then we're going to take to the streets again. There will be riots, there will be fire, and there will be bloodshed because we believe in defending our people.
He says the group prays for peace, but prepares for the worst. Newsom said they won't go back to the days of being pulled over for no reason or policing methods like stop and frisk. Eric Adams agreed to meet with Hawk Newsom, his sister Shavona, and several others after they staged a small protest outside of Brooklyn Borough Hall. The meeting was live-streamed on Instagram by Alfred Martinez. The discussion centered on changes the group thinks are necessary in black neighborhoods, as well as policing in general in New York City. Things became heated after Newsom suggested Adams would be held accountable to a timeline to make changes. Here you can see Adams fire back at Newsom's demand.
But when you hold me accountable, I'm holding you accountable. You go on the ground, stop the violence in my community. I'm holding you accountable. Don't hold me accountable because I'm not being the mayor, being the borough president, being the state senator. I put my body on the line for my community.
During the meeting, Newsom asked if NYPD would reinstate stop and frisk, which was curbed and reformed under Mayor Bill de Blasio. Adams, a former police captain, responded by saying that no one is going to abuse the people of New York City while he is mayor and get away with it. Jim Battolini, NTD News, New York.
And the soon-to-be mayor has responded to the BLM leader's threat. Appearing on CNN, Adams said he won't back down from putting in place a plainclothes anti-gun unit. He called Newsom's talk of violence silly and vowed that the city will not be subjected to burning or rioting. The mayor-elect also said New Yorkers shouldn't allow that type of rhetoric. And a 9th person has died from the Stampede at the Astroworld Music Festival in Houston. The victim was critically injured at the event last Friday and taken to the hospital before she died. The 22-year-old was a college senior at Texas A&M University. Her family members told a local news outlet that the victim went to the festival with her cousin, but they became separated once the crowd began to surge. The music festival last Friday night drew a crowd of around 50,000 people. Soon after rapper Travis Scott made his entrance, there was a massive crowd surge near the main stage. In addition to the 9 deaths, hundreds were injured, and at least 2 are still in critical condition. Houston authorities are now leading a criminal investigation into the deaths. And the federal government is blocking California from getting about $12 billion in public transit funding. That's because the Biden administration disagrees with California's public pension law. Here are the details.
Federal law says that in order to get federal public transit grants, state and local agencies must protect the interests of their employees. California made changes to its public pension system in 2013, making pensions for new employees less generous. The U.S. Department of Labor recently determined that those changes were improper. They say that's because the changes were imposed by law instead of collectively bargained with public employee unions. The newly passed infrastructure bill set aside about $9.5 billion for California public transit agencies, but this new decision means California would not be eligible for those funds. The state would also forfeit about $2.5 billion in grants for public transit that were part of the most recent federal COVID-19 relief bill. The executive director of the California Transit Association says this relief funding has served as a lifeline for them, and in the absence of these federal dollars flowing to California transit agencies, we will absolutely see a reduction in service and losses in our workforce, making it more difficult for agencies to rebound. California Governor Gavin Newsom called the decision extremely concerning. Senators Dianne Feinstein and Alex Padilla from California have urged the Biden administration to overturn the decision.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is vowing to take action over the Biden administration sending illegal immigrants to Florida. He's offering to send them to President Biden's home state of Delaware instead.
DeSantis confirmed to reporters Wednesday that federal agents have been flying underage illegal immigrants to Jacksonville, Florida, after they are apprehended at the southern border, and that his state got to know about it only through leaked reports.
There's no notification to the state of Florida. These are done mostly in the middle of the night, and it's clandestine, and we really have no say into it.
The governor says this practice has been in place since May of this year and is still continuing. He's promising to take legal action against the Biden administration over this. He also proposed a plan of his own.
My view would be, why don't we, if they're going to come here, we'll provide buses and provide them. I will send them to Delaware and do that. I mean, if he's not going to support the border being secured, then he should be able to have everyone there.
This came just days after a 24-year-old illegal immigrant from Honduras who posed as a 17-year-old was arrested and charged with murder in Jacksonville.
We had somebody that was murdered by somebody that was brought in by Biden.
DeSantis accuses the federal government of abandoning its responsibility to secure the border.
If it's a federal responsibility, then they have a responsibility to discharge the duties and enforce the law. If they're not doing that, then clearly I think a state should be able to come in and provide protections. And so that's what we're going to be looking to do.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki acknowledged these flights during a press briefing last month, saying it is our legal responsibility to safely care for unaccompanied children until they can be swiftly unified with a parent or a vetted sponsor. The New York Post reported last month that in addition to flights to Florida, federal agents have been flying illegal immigrants to Westchester, New York.
Coming up, University of Chicago graduate was shot and killed in broad daylight on Tuesday. He was a target of armed robbery. Some students blame measures to defund the police. A mixed reality tech expo resumed in the San Francisco Bay Area. Augmented and virtual reality companies and professionals gather for a chance to connect and learn from each other. That and more on NTD News.
We're becoming more and more urban. We lose our connection with nature. This little girl lives in a world of natural beauty, nature all around her. Not everybody has this opportunity. Things are growing all around her. All sort of handmade things. The artist has portrayed a scene that is so comforting and so grounded that we can experience this ourselves. The artist himself has to be absolutely natural. And it's not easy to do because children are hard to paint. Birds are hard to paint. They don't sit still. This is quite an accomplishment, reflecting nature back to us. It's just a pure, natural painting.
See China before communism. Behold a splendid culture reborn, filled with beauty, majesty, and a powerful message of hope. Come see the performance that has touched the hearts of millions, live on stage. Coming to West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami, November 8th through January 9th. Tickets at shenyun.com/SFL.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
On Tuesday afternoon, a recent graduate of the University of Chicago was shot and killed in a daylight robbery. Faculty and students comment on the incident.
On Tuesday, November 9th, Shaoxing Dennis Zheng was shot and killed on the sidewalk of a quiet neighborhood a few blocks away from the University of Chicago. According to the police, at 2 p.m. a vehicle approached him. A man came out and demanded Dennis's property. Dennis was then shot in the chest. He was later pronounced dead at the University of Chicago Medical Center.
I was just at the gym like an hour before it happened, and as I was walking back to my house, which is right up here, I noticed a bunch of cop cars, and then I saw it's in a group chat that me and my friends were in. Someone sent that somebody had gotten shot right there, and it was pretty jarring.
It's terrible. It's really awful. You know, we live right over on Drexel, and my children cut through 54th, and we go to that park, and sometimes they even go on their own with a neighbor's dad, and then they come home on their own, and that's really scary that it's so close by. That it was like 2 in the afternoon, too, is even more upsetting. That's when my kids are out there, or I might be out there, or, you know, so pretty awful.
One student blamed police defunding.
Born in Pakistan, I grew up in Dallas, senior at U Chicago. Last summer, there were protests on campus to abolish the university police department, and there were over 200 professors from the university, teaching assistant professors who signed on to this statement. No more university police. So I just want to ask them, these professors, these teachers, what were you thinking?
Now, locals are considering what they will have to do in the future.
I think I have to really think twice about certainly not letting them go over there on their own. But even when we're just out in the day in the alley or in the street, I think we got to be a lot more aware that this can kind of happen anytime. But it's sort of hard to prepare for, you know, it's not something you expect.
Police aren't perfect. They do make mistakes, but we need them, as it's apparent now. We do need them, in this community especially. And I'm hoping we can all be stronger because of this, even though it's a horrible tragedy.
The president of the University of Chicago expressed condolences to Zheng's family and friends and called for stronger partnership from the government to tackle the safety problem.
A California school district says it will not enforce the state's current COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Here's NTD's Eileen Eng with more details.
The Calaveras Unified School District Board of Trustees in Northern California voted 5-0 to not support, enforce, or comply with the governor's current vaccine mandate. It stated that the results apply to both students and staff. On October 1st, Governor Gavin Newsom mandated all students K-12 get the vaccine as soon as FDA approves the different age groups to get the shot. At the end of October, the FDA approved the Pfizer vaccine for children ages 5 to 11. Last week, the district released a statement acknowledging all the voices concerned about the mandates. They say they are aware of the potential impacts on the district in terms of possible liability exposure, funding loss, other forms of actions that can be taken against the district in response. It also states they understand that the superintendent recommends complying with the mandate, but the school district will stand by their decision. NTD reached out to the district and superintendent, but did not hear back by deadline. The district intends to discuss their next actions for masking and testing protocols on November 23rd. Eileen Eng, NTD News, California.
An augmented and virtual reality expo resumed this year in California's Silicon Valley. The annual event allows businesses and professionals to connect. Here's more from NTD's Eileen Eng at the expo.
The Augmented World Expo, or AWE, is back in Silicon Valley. From November 9th to 11th, it features artificial intelligence, biointerfaces, haptics, 5G, streaming, and more.
A lot of customers and buyers are kind of connecting here, investors and startups, brands and creators and developers. So really kind of bringing all these people together is the main attraction of this year.
Augmented and virtual reality can be applied in health, education, games, and more. One company created an AR headset and a tablet to help pharmaceutical manufacturers.
They can use the device and have hands-free access, two-way audio and video collaboration with teams that are either on the other end of the glass, elsewhere in a facility at home, or elsewhere around the world.
Users can also access procedures and information through the headset to get prompted, interact, and capture data. At Vario, the advanced mixed reality headsets are photorealistic and boasts to be the lightest and brightest professional-grade headset ever made.
Now with Vario Aero, you can go in the immersion level where you can see
the smallest details in virtual reality. You can see the meters, you can see your cockpit or your racing simulator car, just like it would be in real life.
Haptic gloves for virtual reality allows one to feel the physical characteristics of an object. It also has force feedback, allowing the hand to stop and not pass through air when it wraps around a virtual object.
And by coupling those two in the same interaction, it feels very natural. And your brain makes the leap over the uncanny valley saying, I understand what this object is, I visually recognize it, I feel the physical properties of it, and I can naturally interact with it. Do you actually have to, pick up an item and manipulate it as you would in real life? So it's great for training, for design, for engineering.
Another company uses AR/VR for meditation. A heart rate monitor connects to a virtual landscape to determine the mental state of a person.
That means that the grass is growing and shrinking in relationship with their heart rate. The cloud cover and the fog in the natural landscape are changing with their heart rate as well, and their mental activity. So as they clear their mind, they clear the fog, and the environment moves through 4 seasons.
For others, like Niantic, it's their first time participating in the AWE Expo.
What the Lightship platform is it's all the tools and technology that we use to power our games like Pokemon Go and Ingress and our new Pikmin Bloom. We're taking pieces of that and bringing it out to developers and brands so that they too can create their own realistic AR experiences.
In one game-like demonstration, the software is able to distinguish between objects and people and show the appropriate display.
You can see that it sees that this is grass. It's going to collect the grass from the ground.
Since 2010, over 5,000 companies and 50,000 professionals have participated in AWE to connect, learn, and grow their business in the market.
Every year, the Augie Awards are granted to the best in augmented, virtual, and mixed reality. Categories include Best Collaboration Tool, Best Head-Worn Device, Best Interaction Product, Best Use of AI, among others. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
Coming up, we dive into why it could be hard for China to quit coal, despite its promise of zero carbon emissions by 2060. And Boston Celtics' Enes Kanter says he believes God wants him to be a voice for those who have no voice in China. Hong Kongers and ethnic minorities in Xinjiang and Tibet who suffer under communist tyranny. That and more when we come back here on NTD News. The world's largest carbon emitter, China, has promised to have zero emissions by 2060. But some are questioning whether that's realistic for the country. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on that.
And now we look at why many are questioning China's zero emissions promise. A financial service firm says this would require China to almost rebuild the way the economy is structured. Right now, almost 2/3 of the country's energy comes from coal. A report says for China to reach zero emissions by 2060, it would need to close about 600 coal-fired power plants. But the country is building them at a rate that outshines the rest of the world. With these plants, China added more than 3 times the coal power than the rest of the world added in the same amount of time. And it is planning to generate over 200 gigawatts more, with the new plants under construction. Currently, China is the world's biggest coal consumer, using more than half of the world's coal. And even for China, it took decades to reach this point. If we look at this data here, over the past several decades, despite other countries also increasing their coal consumption, none of their curves were as dramatic as China's. The nation more than doubled its coal consumption over the past 40 years. The trajectory it's on could be hard to stop. Earlier this year, China was tested on its coal resilience. Authorities there ordered coal mines to reduce production to cut emissions. But then a surge in energy demands met with low domestic coal supplies, and it led to a spike in coal prices. And as power companies can't raise energy prices until they get the authorities' approval, they produced less power so as to not lose money. This resulted in power outages in some regions, and China's northeast was hit particularly hard. In light of the power outages, the Chinese regime reopened some coal mines and ordered them to ramp up coal production. Products in China are getting more expensive. This could affect the whole world, especially the U.S., which is importing more from China than ever before. Chinese factory prices are rising at a record rate. Official numbers show producer prices up 13.5% on the year. That's the highest in 26 years. This as China is going through a power crunch, with coal prices soaring, pushing up energy costs for producers. Industries at the early stage of productions are feeling the most pain. For coal businesses, prices are more than double what they were a year ago, and prices in the oil and gas extraction industry rose 60%. Factory prices are the amounts that retailers pay to the manufacturer, and while retailers' prices may not be rising at the same rate as factory prices, they would still be affected. One of the world's most important chip makers says it will open a new plant in Japan. The move comes amid a historic shortage of chips. Semiconductors, or chips, power our modern life. Without them, our phones, computers, and fighter jets wouldn't work. And even though the company, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, isn't a household name in America, the U.S. relies on this one business to make some of its most advanced chips, like those used in defense applications. The most advanced chips could be as small as 5 nanometers. That's smaller than a virus. And right now, only TSMC and Samsung have the ability to make them. America's most advanced chipmaker, Intel, is stuck at 10 nanometers. TSMC is based in Taiwan. The company also makes chips used in cars, where there's a surging demand and supply crunch around the world. TSMC said earlier this year that it would spend $100 billion to expand production. The new plant in Japan will focus on low-end chips for the auto and tech industries, but it won't be able to ease the supply crunch for now. Construction will start next year, and the factory won't start producing chips until 2024. Tokyo welcomes the move and plans to give the company subsidies. TSMC is also expanding its footprint in other countries. It's currently building a $12 billion chip plant in Arizona, and it's also increasing production in China.
An NBA player speaks out to condemn Beijing's human rights abuses in Xinjiang and Hong Kong. When 2 NBA staff ask him to take off his free Tibet shoes, they get a solid no.
Kanter ignited a firestorm by calling China's leader Xi Jinping a brutal dictator. The Boston Celtics player is using social media to get his messages to the masses. Beijing denies orchestrating any campaign against its Muslim minority, but the U.S. State Department estimates that up to 2 million Uyghurs have been held in detention camps.
I actually, learning from the first hand. I sit down with so many, concentration camp survivors, so many Hong Kongers and Tibetans and Taiwanese, and they were the one told me from first hand their story and what was happening there. I sit down with this concentration camp survivor, and she was telling me about all the horrible act that they were doing in there, how many times that she has raped and tortured before, and she was telling me about the organ harvesting, and she was telling me about the surveillance cameras.
Kanter has also been wearing sneakers at games emblazoned with messages like freedom and no Beijing 2022 in opposition to the upcoming Olympics there. The backlash against his campaign was swift. China pulled Celtics games off its streaming service. The NBA says they've received many warnings and demands to ban Kanter.
I don't care if I get fined, I'm not going to take my shoes off. And they told me, we are not talking about fine, we are talking about getting banned. I'm like, listen, I don't care if whoever your boss is, go tell him I'm ready to get banned.
Kanter insists that he didn't break any rules and that it's his responsibility to speak up for those suppressed in China.
Today marks the 103rd anniversary of the end of World War I, and France commemorates the brave soldiers who won the war and other veterans at a ceremony in Paris. NTD's David Vivas has the story.
Thursday marked the commemoration of the end of World War I. French President Emmanuel Macron attended a ceremony at the foot of the iconic Arc de Triomphe monument in Paris. He was emotional when paying homage to Hubert Germain, the last surviving member of an order honoring heroes of France's liberation during World War II, who died in October. He was 101.
Everyone knew then that the day would come when we will have to say farewell to the last companion of the liberation, the one who will take the final spot in the crypt. This day has arrived.
Germans will be laid to rest at Mont Valérien, a fortress west of Paris, alongside other members of the order. United States Vice President Kamala Harris attended the Armistice Day ceremony. World War I was fought out in large part on French soil between 1914 and 1918. It left about 10 million dead on all sides and remains firmly anchored in the French psyche as a bloody conflict that left the nation traumatized.
And now to the UK, a day of remembrance. Events took place today across a number of locations, each observing a 2-minute silence for those we lost in the First World War. A ceremony at London's Cenotaph War Memorial saw wreaths of poppies laid as ceremonial guards paid their respects. NTD's Neil Woodrow was there.
Here at the Cenotaph in Whitehall, London, Armistice Day is commemorated. The armistice brought an end to the First World War, with Germans to evacuate invaded countries within 2 weeks. The armistice was signed on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. This annual service of remembrance on November the 11th in London is organised by the Western Front Association, or WFA, who say the ceremony is held to remember the courage and comradeship of those on all sides who served their countries during the Great War. It also commemorates the end of the war and the armistice. Crowds gathered to watch and be a part of proceedings. Pipes and drums from the London Scottish Regiment led the procession. The bugler's last post sounded, and at 11 a.m. precisely there was the 2-minute silence first commanded by King George V. Wreath layers followed the buglers' playing of Reveille, laying them to rest on the cenotaph. Prayers of remembrance were then spoken.
Remember your holy promise and look with love on
This gentleman pays his respects to those fallen during battle.
So I'm very mindful of people who have given their lives. They gave their today for our tomorrows. And it's wonderful that people come and not celebrate but remember. And it's
This lady's granddad fought in the war, though he never spoke about it. She said today is about saying thank you.
I think we should remember that these men, some of only 16, in 15, 16, were out in hell. Those trenches were hell, but they didn't give up. They fought. And Second World War was even worse with the weapons they had then. But then our boys in the First World War had to deal with the mustard gas.
It is 27 years since the WFA campaigned to reinstate the November 11th Armistice Day ceremony after it lapsed in 1946 in favour of Remembrance Sunday. This stirring ceremony has concluded here at the Cenotaph in London. Remembrance Sunday will follow this weekend. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, London.
The River Thames was declared dead over 60 years ago, but a major report on the state of the river found the water quality has improved significantly. Many species are thriving, including seahorses and sharks. But scientists say rising water temperatures and pollution still pose a risk. NTD's Joy Felix has the story.
The River Thames, the second longest river in the UK, is getting a health check. Volunteers and staff from the Zoological Society of London are sampling the habitats on the banks of the river near London to count and identify the shellfish within them.
We do the same thing year on year. That's the key. It's so important, this sort of basic study. We won't know how the Thames is changing without basic studies like this.
Pecorelli has been in charge of the sampling since 2008. He and his colleagues found the ecosystem of the Thames has changed over time. Over the last 50 years, one new species has been introduced per year.
Well, we have records. The Thames is one of the most invaded, for want of a better word, environment in the whole world. So introduced species brought here from other parts of the world.
While some are harmless, others can have dire consequences for the ecosystem. The river was declared biologically dead and deprived of oxygen in 1957 by the Natural History Museum. But the situation changed for the better. The river is now healthy and thriving.
We've got over 115 species of fish living in it, 92 birds, an abundance of marine mammals, seals, sharks even, and of course very cute seahorses that live in the outer estuary.
While no videos of sharks have been recorded in the River Thames yet, the species of shark present here are similar to the one already observed in Wales. Debney says that all parts of the river should be protected, with an emphasis on the estuary as it is an important nursery area.
So we've found during our surveys over 20 different types of species that breed, including sea bass, which we all enjoy eating, seahorses out in Greenwich, part of our juvenile surveys, again small ones, and other fish called, including a cousin of salmon called smelt, which actually smells of cucumber.
The Zoological Society of London published its major report on the state of the Thames on Wednesday. It warns of threats from rising water temperature and pollution. The main pollutants are single-use plastic bottles and sewage. Joy Felix, NTD News.
Coming up, Disney shares down 7% today after telling investors its subscriber growth is slowing down, but its theme parks are seeing more business. That and more here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm here to tell you about my new product from MyPillow, towels that actually work. Watch this absorbency test. Here's another towel that we randomly went out and bought. Here's one of my towels with the nice design. I don't know if you can see this, but you could line a swimming pool with this. This is crazy. Get rid of it. Towels that actually work.
The new MyPillow towels are exclusively made with 100% USA combed cotton with proprietary technology and with maximum absorbency. They dry you faster and are guaranteed to work.
I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow. And to thank you for all your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. Go to MyPillow.com to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. For example, you get my dog beds for as low as $19.99, or for a limited time, you can get my 6-piece towel sets, regularly $109.99, now only $39.99. The lowest price ever with your promo code.
While Disney didn't have the greatest quarter, it did announce the Disney Metaverse. It gave few details, but it's something to look toward. NTD's Grace Coulter has more.
The Walt Disney Company has missed estimates across the board. In its earnings release, the company reported earnings per share of 37 cents, 27% lower than estimates of 51 cents. They also had revenue of $18.53 billion, around 1% lower than estimates of $18.79 billion. CEO Bob Chapek started off the earnings call reiterating Disney's strategic priorities.
First and foremost, telling the world's most original and enduring stories. Second, maximizing the synergy of our unique ecosystem to deepen consumers' connection to our characters and our stories. And lastly, using the power of our far-reaching platforms and new technologies to give consumers the best entertainment experience possible.
Disney Plus subscriber numbers were disappointing. They added 2.1 million, while analysts thought they would add 78% more, 9.4 million. Chapek says Disney will double the number of markets Disney Plus is in by fiscal year 2023, while putting out fresh content.
In total, we are nearly doubling the amount of original content from our marquee brands, Disney, Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars, and National Geographic, coming to Disney Plus in FY22, with the majority of our highly anticipated titles arriving July through September.
and Disney parks are seeing more business. All theme parks and cruise ships were open during the quarter. Disney said they spent $1 billion just to conform to the government virus regulations. Chapek also announced a big new Disney project. He said, "Our efforts to date are merely a prologue to a time when we'll be able to connect the physical and digital worlds even more closely, allowing for storytelling without boundaries in our own Disney metaverse."
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Before you go, here's something you should know. Don't forget you can catch all of NTD's programs on television. NTD Business premieres live Mondays through Fridays at 5 p.m. We broadcast to many of your favorite platforms, Apple TV and Roku, for example. We're also rapidly growing on cable, satellite, and over-the-air all across the United States. Just go to ntd.com/TV, type in your zip code, and find all the ways you can watch NTD.